the artist who produced them. A variety of pieces made by medieval sculptors and metalwork artists on the territories of present-day Italy and Germany contain signatures of their makers with the verb facere. This verb, however, was often applied not only by artists but also by donors to perpetuate their names on objects of religious art. The ambiguity of the verb facere, and specifically of the me fecit formula, which is frequently found on objects produced for religious use, often complicates identifying whether a signature refers to a donor or to a maker. Publications addressing this issue have not expressed unanimous opinion on it. Moreover, three-dimensional objects were not sufficiently considered in this context as opposed to illuminated manuscripts or paintings. I suggest that each example, including Frankenhorst door knockers, needs to be regarded individually with a consideration of historical and cultural context. The me fecit signature at the ring-shaped handles relates these door knockers from Frankenhorst, a small town in Germany, to a variety of similar examples from other European regions, as they possessed cultural and spiritual unity through Christian religion. The inscription at the ring of the bronze door knocker from Frankenhorst finishes with the phrase Bernardus me fecit. These words, in fact, come out of a lion's mouth whose face decorates the piece. But does the lion refer to a donor or to a maker? The vagueness of distinction between these terms is explicable, as medieval artists were often members of clergy, just like donors, who frequently intervened professionally and personally in artistic activity. This may have contributed to building confusions about the meaning of the me fecit formula that scholars have faced at present. Previous scholarship considered Bernardus was not the maker of the door knockers, but the donor of the whole church portal. The me fecit signature was interpreted not as relating to the door knockers, but to the word Ianuas from the first portion of the inscription. However, it would have been rather uncommon if an inscription commemorating a donor of a portal was placed at a door knocker. In the medieval period, mentioning a name in an inscription or a signature was equated to physical presence of a person and established a substantial connection between them and an object with their name inscribed. As a rule, inscriptions and signatures of medieval patrons and makers are found exactly at the objects that they have donated or produced. By indicating a firm connection with their pieces of work in written self-representations, makers underlined their devotional gestures and contributions and aimed ensuring remembrance among their contemporaries and future generations. There is strong evidence that medieval artists applied the me fecit signatures following the steps of their predecessors from antiquity and adhered to the traditional ways of signing their works. The origins of the formula me fecit could be traced back to the 6th century BC, and what is specifically important, it's related to metalwork. One of the oldest artist inscriptions in Latin is found at the golden Praenestine fibula. This inscription clearly states that Manius was an artist and produced the fibula for Numerius, who commissioned it. The use of the me fecit formula in first-person singular here suggests that the object itself makes its testimony. It relates to the conception of animation through the casting process, which assigns a caster the role of creator. Similar motive of indirect identification when an object comes alive and introduces its maker is also found in early medieval inscriptions. This indicates that artists, including the maker of the door knockers from Frankenhorst, were building on established tradition originating from antiquity. Moreover, it also allows suggesting that metalwork and cast bronzes may have encouraged the me fecit signing practice to originate and develop. There is a significant difference in the formulas like me fecit and hoc fecit and some others. Recent scholarship considers that me fecit was frequently used in the early Middle Ages, whereas other expressions were firmly linked to patronage formulas from antiquity. Also, the placing of a signature should be considered when interpreting whether it belongs to a donor or to an artist. While patrons' inscriptions are most frequently placed prominently, artist signs of authorship are commonly found on marginal areas. For instance, an argument that hoc fecit is a patronage formula is illustrated with the portal inscription Gislebertus hoc fecit. It belongs not to a sculptor, but to the 10th century donor and founder of the cathedral. Indeed, a number of historical accounts mention the nobleman Gislebert, who had connections among highly ranked persons in France. The tradition of donors' inscriptions at portals of Christian churches relates to that of inscriptions at ancient triumphal arches, as both perpetuate the names and deeds of historical personalities. On the one hand, Bernardo's name at the door knockers may fit in the tradition of placing donors' names at church portals, but on the other hand, authorship developed in the context of patronage, and sculptors may have followed these conventions using slightly different formulas to distinguish themselves from donors. Gislebertus' inscription applies the patronage formula hoc fecit, whereas may fecit signature at Freckenhorst door knockers, just like other examples, may indicate that Bernardus was the maker. Ancient formulas were adopted and applied by medieval sculptors to indicate authorship and express piety in the new context of Christian religious art. Thus, originating from antiquity, the Mefekid signatures link ancient and medieval periods. I propose that bronze casting may have encouraged the Mefekid signing practice. When compared to other examples, bronze was considered as a living matter. It was usually associated with magical transformations, and sculptors working in bronze were reputed to as having divine creative power. In this context, the use of the Mefekid formula in signatures at bronze objects naturally corresponds to the idea that these objects may come alive and speak for themselves. The phrase Bernardus me fecit at the door knocker may be interpreted as the words of a lion decorating it. The way in which these words are placed at the ring-shaped handles in the teeth of the lion makes them appear as if they are coming out of its mouth. The bronze caster achieved expression of his petition not only in words, but also through the technique and shape that he gave to the rings. A similar feature when things that a person says and shows are shown as text in banderoles coming out of their mouth was used by medieval scribes and manuscript illuminators as well. So this was done usually to indicate authorship. For instance, this 12th century manuscript has a self-portrait signed by the nun Guda, an artist and a scribe. She wears a habit of a nun and holds a signed banderole that curves similar to the ring of a door knocker. In this inscription, the nun doesn't deviate from monastic regulations. She expresses humility by referring to herself as a sinner, but at the same time, she claims authorship. She firmly holds the banderole with her left hand, which establishes a close connection between the title banner, the inscription in it, and the image of Buddha. Similarly, the lion at the door knocker firmly holds the ring with an inscription in its teeth, as if it is reaffirming affiliation with Bernardus. Thus, the examples discussed above demonstrate that artists in various media, especially metalwork artists and bronze casters, sign their works with the Mefekid signatures, aiming to ensure themselves remembrance and salvation. Related to figural imagery, this Latin formula emphasizes a firm connection between the maker and an object which comes alive as a result of their sacred labor. Freckenhorst door knockers, signed by Bernardus, are an illustrative example of overall issues, including the issue of authorship related to Mefekid signatures. On the one hand, the analysis of Bernardus' inscription and its comparison with other examples may indicate that he was the maker of the door knockers, a bronze caster, possibly with a religious background, respected at Freckenhorst. But on the other hand, there is no firm argument to exclude the possibility that he was the donor. The absence of conclusive evidence and archival data on Bernardus' social position allows a room for interpretation and hypothesis. Another major aspect that this paper explores is liminality as applied to placement of artists' and donors' signatures in specific areas in a church. In the medieval period, a church was perceived as an asylum from sin, whereas liminal areas, like entrances to churches and church gates, served as thresholds between secular and sacred spaces. Artists were likely to place their inscriptions at the thresholds of doorways which were commonly associated with the gates of heaven or with the Savior. Rings at the doors of ancient temples were also symbols of asylum that anyone was allowed to claim for, should they require it. For instance, a fugitive clasping a ring at the doors of a temple would have been granted protection from his chasers. This aspect reveals close connections between ancient and medieval periods. The symbolic nature of lion-head door knockers is rooted in the ancient past and concerns both their imagery and material bronze. The continuity of the motif of a lion face at door knockers could be traced from the 5th century BC up to the early Christian period and subsequently to the Christian Middle Ages. The earliest door knockers with the heads of lion, ram, and Medusa Gorgon were found at the doors of the Parthenon. Set at the doors of temples or churches or at city gates, such door knockers functioned as guards. Lion and lion images were also frequently used at ancient sarcophagi, tombs, and sepulchres to mark the division between the world of the living and the dead. In the ancient period, a lion was regarded as an embodiment of strength and as a symbol of the sun, and the manes of lions' head door knockers were often modeled as flames. Ancient Greek and Roman lion masks may be regarded as links between Eastern and Western cultures, and between pagan and Christian symbolism. In effect, they anticipated the appearance of lion head representations at the door knockers of Christian churches. In Europe, Christian artists adopted, rethought, and enriched the images of lions and their symbolism. This may partly be explained by numerous references to lions in the Bible, which was one of the major sources for medieval artists. In various contexts, lion, the strongest among the beasts, was referred to as a positive symbol of power and royalty, or as an image of Christ. Symbolism of a lion image is complex and could have multiple meanings, sometimes with negative connotations. In the Gospels of Peter, for example, a devil is compared to a roaring lion hunting for the souls. The ambiguity of lion's image may have resulted in assigning it the role of powerful and protective, yet frightening god that possesses apotropaic qualities of averting evil. In antiquity, paired door knockers with representations of Gorgon and lion were often placed at the entrances to tombs. Apotropaic symbolism of lion faces may have derived from ancient Greek Gorgonians. These carved reliefs, engravings, or drawings with faces of Gorgon placed on doors, shields, coins, and tombstones were believed to be warding off evil. Both killing and defensive, the head of defeated by Perseus, Gorgon, was used by this Greek hero as a weapon until he presented the trophy to the goddess Athena to place it on her shield. Akin to the images of Gorgon and no less ambiguous in their nature, lion faces were regarded as possessing defensive power and protecting from demons. For this reason, in the times of antiquity, painted terracotta heads of lions were used to decorate rooftops of temples, and in addition to their symbolic function, they also had a practical significance as waterspouts. These elements of exterior architectural sculpture of ancient temples could be paralleled to gargoyles placed in the exteriors of Christian churches. The gargoyles also functioned as waterspouts and were used to deter enemies of the church. The same qualities, plus associations with Christ, were common to lion-head door knockers, just like numerous other examples. Both the door knockers from Frankenhorst and from San Zeno in Verona symbolize Christ and deliverance from sins. In this respect, the role of rings held by lions in their teeth also requires interpretation. In pagan Germanic cultures, a ring was recognized as a symbol of an oath or law. The earliest mentions of knights taking or reaffirming oaths on rings go back to the 9th century. Also, according to ancient philosophers and historians, ancient temples had rites of asylum, and a fugitive clasping a ring at the doors of a temple would have been granted protection from his chasers. Already about the time of the Emperor Constantine, Christian monasteries and churches also acquired privileges of being refuges, sometimes providing shelter and protection to debtors or to those who broke the law. In a sense, these asylum rites were inherited from ancient temples. The conception of a church as an asylum where the faithful could shelter from sin and devil found its reflection in bronze casting. Decorated with the scenes from the Genesis, the Bernard doors at Hildesheim have a representation of the hand of God. It reappears exactly at the level of the ring of the lion head door knocker, and may be interpreted as if it is going to clasp the ring handle, claiming for an asylum inside the church. I also consider that this detail is parallel to a masterly hand of a bronze caster who may have used it to demonstrate his piety and aspiration for salvation. It may convey the maker's message that he is standing at this liminal area at the threshold of the church, but wishes to stay in the church and repulses sinful life. This door knocker at the Benoit doors may also have worked not only for the maker, but also for any person entering the church. When directing their hand to reach the handle of the door knocker, the faithful would have got an impression as if they are reaching the hand of God to hold it and be saved. Metaphorically, Christ was seen by the faithful as a refuge, as one of the Psalms says. To conclude, in my interpretation, ring-shaped handles of Freckenhorst door knockers may have symbolized the law and cohesiveness and harmony of their circular shapes, recalled the continuity from the alpha to the omega, from the beginning to the end. And this indeed strengthens the associations between a lion-head door knocker holding a ring in its teeth and Christ, the lawgiver. It also reaffirms that the church was an asylum for the faithful. Moreover, the position of the inscription at the ring-shaped handles of the door knockers ensured that it followed their circular shape and allowed a parallel between Bernardus' words and oath. Being reaffirmed endlessly, like the shape of a circle, an oath would have never be broken, and Bernardus' petition would be reiterated permanently. Thus, by encompassing it in a harmonious circular shape, Bernardus expressed belief that the faithful at Freckenhorst and himself would obtain salvation. Thank you for your attention.